Hey YouTube, my name is Mike Montaigne. I'm the communication coordinator here at the Rock Bible Church, and I just want to thank you so much for tuning into our channel. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, go ahead and do that so you can get a notification the next time that we drop a video. Also, if you live around in the area, we would love for you to come and check us out at our 9 o'clock or our 11 o'clock services on Sunday mornings. Now it's time for the video, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it has the blessings upon your life. You have a wonderful day.
All right, so we are in our twin bed marriage series, and so for the past couple months, or past couple weeks, we have been talking about marriages. We have talking about how to see marriages grow in the gospel. Again, remember, one of my prayers is that all marriages would be centered in Jesus. One of the things I want for Christmas isn't gifts, isn't toys, but to have God-centered marriages inside our church. And in the last couple weeks, I know I've been hearing stories about how God is just really growing people, doing some great things inside our church. And really, it is great to see people taking steps. A husband and a wife taking steps to improve their marriage, to grow closer to each other. And I truly believe that if you put the work in, if you put in the work, 2022 is going to be a great year for many of you. A year where God is going to show up and God is going to heal and restore your marriages. And so remember, we have talked about these 4 gauges. There are 4 gauges to every marriage to help you keep a pulse on your marriage. The first one is the spiritual gauge. These are 2 souls growing closer to Jesus, 2 souls growing in their devotion. You need both of you chasing after Jesus. And if both of you are chasing after Jesus, the closer you get to Jesus, the closer you will get to each other. The second one is that physical gauge. We know that this world will get you down. This world will get you tired. Your back will hurt. You will get sick. Difficulties will happen. And this is where communication comes into play. You have to be talking. You have to be talking about how to live a healthy lifestyle. You have to be talking about rest and living a life together. And the last 2 are the sexual gauge and the emotional gauge. Today I want to address both of those. So let's just pull off the Band-Aid and dive into the gauge that I believe will make some of us uncomfortable. But sex is a very interesting thing. I mean, it's a little bit weird to talk about it, but God designed sex. He designed it for our pleasure. Sex is a good thing. But you and I have been bombarded with sex created by this world, or sex manipulated by this world. Not God-centered sex, but man-centered sex. I mean, sex is everywhere right now. It's used to sell products. It's used to influence cultures. It's used so much and hijacked so much now. Our culture is making sex their identity, where you now are defined by your sexual preference. God did not design sex to be your identity. God did not design sex to be your need. God did not design sex to even be your goal. Let me say that again. God did not design sex to be your identity. God did not design sex to be your need or even your goal. Sex was designed to bond a husband and wife together. The Bible calls this one flesh. But the world has distorted it. And frankly, I think for many of us, we make it an uncomfortable subject. For we as believers have done a poor job of discussing sex because it makes us uncomfortable. I mean, it makes us so uncomfortable for us. We even debated and thought through having this really, really aggressive slide put up on the screen for you. Like, that's really aggressive. Like, that's in your face. And so we thought, man, maybe we should put this slide up and make it really aggressive so that everyone will know what we're talking about and it be in their face. Because for some reason, for us as the church, we have an uncomfortable time talking about sex. But why? Because in the reality of it, the church should never be ashamed of something God designed. The church should never be ashamed to preach or talk about sex because the Bible talks about sex. Bible teaches sex. The church should be excited to talk about it because the world, all they do is talk about it. We need a biblical perspective. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4 says this: marriage must be honored among all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled. For God will judge sexually immoral people and adulterers. Whew. It's a bold language here. That Greek word for among all literally means every single person. No one is excluded. That word undefiled actually means to not stain or not to get dirty. When I was thinking about that, something kind of laid on my heart. Remember back in the 90s when you watched those like, they always had like the corny dog movies, right? Like Beethoven or Air Bud or something. And at some point in time, that dog would get covered in mud and he would walk in the house and the mom or dad would be like, no, in like slow motion. And the dog would just shake and sling dirt and mud everywhere. And we would laugh and we would giggle. And it was a 90s movie. I feel for many of us, we do that to our sex lives. We walk into our sex lives and we just stain it, defile it, sling dirt, mud everywhere. Either because we have an unbiblical idea of sex, a worldly idea of sex, or we bring hurts and hang-ups into our marriages. Unresolved pain, poor choices, whatever it is, when it comes to sex and the marriage, the first thing I want us to think about when we're dealing with sex as a church is this: we must deal with our baggage. You and I must deal with our baggage. I would guess 99% of us in this room have entered into our marriages with baggage. Maybe it's divorce. Maybe it's a serious relationship that lasted for years that involved sex. Maybe it was one-night stands. Maybe it was something that was done to you. It wasn't your fault. And I am so sorry you had to go through that. You had to deal with that. I am so sorry for those wounds. We all have baggage. As a person who has dealt with his baggage, I know how hard it is to deal with baggage. But hear me in this. If you don't heal from yesterday's wounds, you will bleed all over the person you're married to today. Let me say that again. If you don't heal from yesterday's wounds, you will bleed all over the person you're married to today. And really, it's not the other person's job to heal you. It's not your spouse's or your therapist's job to heal you. Can they assist you in the journey? Absolutely. But Jesus should be your source of healing. And if you enter into your marriage with hurts and hang-ups that you're expecting your spouse to heal, please let me discourage you from that, because all you'll find is more hurts and hang-ups. I say this all the time. Two broken people don't make one whole person. Two broken people just make sharp objects in which to stab the other person with. And if you're not careful, you can find that all throughout your marriage. It doesn't just have to be with sex. If there's anger issues or resentment or insecurities or whatever, you can find yourself broken and stabbing your other spouse, stabbing the other person, and not even realizing it. Brittany and I, just the other day, we were bickering and fighting over something so stupid. We looked back, and halfway through it, God just kind of instilled in our hearts and just stopped us, because we were in the moment. Like, we haven't had an argument in like 2.5 years. Like an argument, you know what I mean? Like an argument. We've bickered, and you're annoying. Well, you're annoying too. Like, we've had that. But we haven't had an argument. And this bickering was moving, right? It was progressing fairly quickly to becoming an argument. And at that point in time, as it progressed a little bit further, God just instilled in her heart, instilled in our heart, and the temperature, because you know how you always bring it, right? And there. And God just calmed it. He goes, what are you two doing? You are wounded in this moment. Again, you are stabbing the other person. And in the midst of the argument, and this is so not in my notes, but In the midst of the argument, you and this up. In the midst of the argument, bro, you and I just like, bleh. And you just expressed your wounds, I expressed my wounds, your hurts, my hurts, and we ended in a time of just like weeping and like praying for each other, and it was healthy for my soul. But praise God, he stilled our hearts, because it almost went to a place that we've all taken it, right? If you're not careful and you don't allow Jesus to help you with those things, you will find yourself on a regular basis wounding and stabbing your partner. We have to deal with our baggage. And before you know it, you've made your love life into something that brings shame, not something designed by God for your good. If you have baggage, here's what I would encourage you to do. Don't suppress it, but seek help, seek healing from it. Talk to someone, talk to a counselor, get a close friend, come to this altar. God didn't design sex to be a burden. God designed sex to be a joy. The second thing I want us to think about when dealing with sex is this. One, we must deal with our baggage, but number two, we must deal with our sinful habits. I really wrestled with calling it sinful habits. I actually thought about calling it like, well, you got to deal with your bad habits. But then let's just be real. We need to call it for what it is. It's not just bad habits. It is sin. You need to address sin. I was doing some research for this, and one of the most popular adult websites reports that over 130 million people visit that website each day. So within the hour that you and I are sitting here worshiping Jesus, 5,416,666 people will visit that pornographic website in just this hour. This is a problem. This is a sin-filled problem, church. It plagues all ages. I remember discussing with a church member about an 8-year-old having an iPad because they discovered their 8-year-old was watching porn in their room. My first response is, he's 8. He doesn't need an iPad. He needs a BB gun and some action figures. And I said, take it away from him. You are potentially damaging this child for the rest of his life. And the mom's response to me is, that's my only downtime. It's when I give him the iPad and send him to his room. Shame on us as parents who would rather have downtime instead of train our children. Church, our bad habits is an epidemic. Our sinful habits are an epidemic. And it's not just pornographic websites. I mean, it's books, to TV shows, to YouTube channels, to movies. They all put forth an unhealthy, unrealistic idea, warping our mind and pulling us away from Jesus. The Bible tells us marriage must be honored among all. And the marriage bed kept undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral people and adulterers. These sinful habits are not something you can just sweep under the rug. They must be addressed. God doesn't take sin lightly. And church, neither should we. Now let me address the singles for a moment. Because for the singles, for many of you in this room, you're sitting here like, oh, this is the marriage series. I'm safe. Whew. Nope. This is your turn. Let me just talk to you quickly for a brief second. The sexual sinful habits that you are instilling in your heart today, these habits that you are instilling in your heart today, that you're creating today, can and will destroy your marriage tomorrow. Please hear me. As I imagine multiple married people in this room could give testimony, standing up going, I wish I had addressed the sinful habits before I got married. I wish I had stopped these sinful habits before I got married. I wish I never brought them into my marriage. Can I just testify to you? Please seek help, address these habits now, because you think, as a guy who was in ministry, and I thought in my mind, if I could just get married, as a guy who didn't have sex and was a virgin until he got married, if I could just have sex, I'll stop having these lustful thoughts. If I could just see my wife naked once, I'll stop having these lustful thoughts. Like, if you think that just getting married so that you can have sex will fix everything, please let me tell you that is not the case. Because sin, the devil has you wrapped around his finger. You need Jesus to break it, not your wife. You need Jesus to break it, not your husband. Please deal with your sexual sin today. I was asked by a teenager the other day who was her first boyfriend. And it's weird now because our student ministry is like people of them are dating. Like, we've had students date before, but like now they're dating and they're like dating each other, and it's like weird. And so we're praying for Tyler and stuff like this. And one of them came up and says, I think you noticed I'm dating so-and-so. And I was like, I did. And she was like, Pastor, give me some advice. And here's what I told her. And here's what I want to tell you singles. Establish godly boundaries and establish godly benefits ahead of time. First date. Here's what I encourage you. First date. Very first date. Establish. Here's my godly boundaries. These lines will not be crossed. And the moment you try to cross them, God is more important than you. And you are kicked to the curb. Establish godly boundaries. On the flip side, establish godly benefits. Look at them and say, my hope is this relationship only lasts 3 months, 6 months, a year. My hope, my prayer is by the end of this, I will look more like Jesus, not less. And here's what we're going to do to help me grow in Jesus and you grow in Jesus. I wish someone told me that. I wish someone told us that when we first got married, first started dating, to sit down and go, what are our godly boundaries and what are our godly benefits? How can I make Brittany look more like Jesus? If you do that, it'll save you a world of headache and heartache. Amen? All right, that's free for you guys. Sex is really so important for a marriage. Keeping it holy is vital for a person to fear God, to have a God-centered marriage. Health always follows holiness. Health always follows holiness. Let me give you a couple more verses, and then we'll get out of this awkward conversation. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 5, it says this. When a man is newly married, he needs not to go into the army nor be obligated in any way. He must be free to stay at home for a full year and bring joy to the wife he has married. That's in the Bible. That's amazing. Like 1 whole year. No obligations except for bringing her joy, ladies and gentlemen. Like, this just shows how much God longs for marriages to succeed, longs for marriages to grow, to invest in a marriage and start off on a solid foundation. And some of you may be saying, Pastor, well, we've been married for like 20 years. Good. You got some catching up to do. And so for the next couple years, maybe you should cancel the fishing trip. What, Pastor? Yeah, cancel the fishing trip and just lay on the couch with your wife. I was thinking about this last night, and Brittany doesn't know this. But I think the lazy boys is an amazing thing, but also a thing maybe not designed by the Lord because it separates instead of brings together. We don't have a lazy boy in our house, but last night we were watching a movie, and Brittany was laying that way, and her feet, and I was laying this way, and her feet were on me. And then you scoot over, and like I thought you were reorganizing, and you kind of grunted at me and said, "Move," and kind of just like you just kind of snuggled up next to me and just like laid on me. And I'm a physical touch is my love language, And she just snuggled up next to me and just kind of put her head like on my chest. And I don't know if you remember that. I know, sorry, making you uncomfortable. But like I kissed her head, and just at that moment, like that meant the world to me. The world to me, that she just kind of snuggled up next to me. And I think lazy boys separate that. So get a couch, preferably a small one, and get in close. You need those things for a whole year. Let me give you the next one. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. A husband should fulfill his marital responsibilities to his wife, and likewise a wife to her husband. It is not the wife who has the right to her own body, but the husband. In the same way, it is not the husband who has the rights to his own body, but the wife. Do not deprive each other, except by a mutual agreement for a specific time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. And then the last verse. Then resume your relationship. He's talking about sex. Resume your relationship so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. You want to fight the devil together? Brittany just said, oh gosh. This Bible tells you how to fight the devil together. Ladies, can I encourage you? If you sit there and you say, not tonight, honey. Yeah. Can I just encourage you to do this? Say, let me pray with you right now. Let me encourage you because I know it's difficult. Women, I would encourage you. If you're saying not tonight, or the men, you're saying not tonight, say, hey, let me pray with you. Let me pray that the God will work in our hearts and lead our hearts. You know, I guarantee you the moment you say, not tonight, but let me pray with you, that'll dissolve any argument. And then follow it up. But on Friday, I'm going to rock your world. On Tuesday, put it on the calendar. Ladies, you want to see your man just soar? You want to see him flutter and just walk around fluttering? Pray with him and then give him a date. He'll count down. He'll be doing jumping jacks. He'll do push-ups ahead of time. He'll shave. He'll get a shower. It'll do all those different things. You need this, and you need this for your relationship. It's about putting the other person first. It's about serving them, not dominating them. Women, sex should never be a tool you use to punish, manipulate, or control your husbands. Men, leaders of the home, I'm going to be a little rough on you right now. Sex starts long before the bedroom. You want a healthy sex life? Pick up after yourselves. Too many men expect their wives to work, to clean, to cook, to take care for the kids, to do all of the homework, to handle all of the fights, and still have enough energy to do their makeup, do their hair, and throw down on you after the kids go to bed. That is not fair to your wife. In no way, shape, or form are you expecting her to do that, because if you had to do that for just 1 minute, you would be begging to go to sleep. Men, you have to carry the weight. And I guarantee you this. The devil is whispering in your wife's ear after the 1,000th time she's had to pick up your dirty underwear because you're too lazy to put it in the hamper. Okay, that leads us to our next gauge, emotions. Remember, the Bible, remember, we are talking about 4 different gauges in which to gauge our marriages: spiritual, physical, sexual, and emotions. Because emotions are interesting things. They can be fickle. They can change from moment to moment, from season to season. We must remember that our emotions are just but a gauge. They never should be our guide. I said this before, God's word is our guide, not our emotions. And as believers, we should lead our spouses so that their emotions don't rule them or cause a void between y'all. Here's a verse that I love, and I remind myself in this. Hebrews chapter 3 says this: "See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you have an evil, unbelieving heart that forsakes the living God, but exhort one another each day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by sinful deceit." Because the devil attacks emotions. The devil attacks the heart. The devil attacks the intellect. He attacks your attitude. He attacks all of it. The devil is walking around looking for a chink, a crack in your armor so that he can exploit it. And before you know it, if you allow your emotions to be exploited, you are now just a puppet on the string. And he is just moving you any way you want to go. We have all been there. Most of the time we call it seeing red. So what do we must do when it comes to our emotions? Well, it's simple. We must deal with our sinful habits. We as humans strive for emotional intimacy. We feel most secure in life when we have someone in our corner, someone who understands us. I was talking to a pastor this week, and I said, hey man, what's going on? He goes, bro, to be honest, my depression's kicked back up. I said, okay, so what does that look like? Here's a pastor of a church. He's sitting here going, I struggle to find myself even getting out of bed in the morning. And he says, my heart and my mind just struggles with all of this. And I said, what can I do to help? He says, bro, just knowing that I can talk to you and knowing that you're in my corner really, really does help. We prayed, and I've been encouraging him and helping him through these things. Emotions are interesting because he was telling me about it. He's like, one day I'm great, and then something happens or nothing happens, and I just wake up and I feel like this, and I just don't want to go to work. I don't want to go on. I just want to lay in my bed. Emotional intimacy isn't easy. It requires both parties to keep a close eye on their emotional needs and a close eye on the other person's emotional needs, because sinful habits will rear their heads. We have to keep them in check. Let me just give you three. Let me give you three sinful habits that you may have when it comes to your emotions. Defensiveness, blame, retaliation, or revenge. Defensiveness. James tells us that every person be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, for man's anger, or human's anger, does not accomplish God's righteousness. Defense is a wall in which you put up to deflect against pain and accountability from other people. Have you ever been in an argument and you're more concerned about making your argument and not listen to the other person? Defensiveness. To where they're talking and giving their points and you're sitting here going, well, they just shut up so I can give them my points. It's defensiveness. For some of you right now, you're squirming in your seats going, I hope my wife hears this. I hope my husband hears this, because it doesn't need it from me. It's not me. I'm not the one. And you're being defensive right now. You need to address it. We all put up these walls and we need Jesus to tear them down. Number two, blame. Remember this series, I told you and I encourage you, this is about your improvement, not your spouse's improvement. If your spouse is making 99% of the problem, okay, let Jesus deal with them. You still deal with your 1%, the one that you are responsible for. And saying that you're not going to work on yourself until they start to work on themselves, that's childish. Please hear me, husband. Please hear me, wife. That is childish. And the reality is, God has called you to your sanctification, not theirs. He has called you to be holy because he is holy. So focus on you being holy and praying that God will make them holy. Let me ask this question to you. What is one thing you need to improve on? Not your spouse. What is one thing you need to improve on? What is one thing that you can do right now that will make your marriage better if you put in the hard work? What is one thing? And I want to challenge you, take ownership of that. Lastly, retaliation or revenge. When you live in a world of blame and defense, you create an environment that makes you bitter, causing you to lash out in unhealthy ways. Church, quit stabbing your other partner. Allow Jesus to heal your wounds. I know you think you're not the problem, but at some point your wounds, if not addressed, will bleed all over your marriage. It won't be fixed tonight. Won't probably be fixed next week. It's going to take work, but I believe you can remove some of those sinful habits and cultivate God-centered ones. 3, and then I'm done. 3 habits that I want you to instill. Respect, love, and a willingness to restore. Respect, love, and a willingness to restore. Look at Ephesians chapter 5 and 1 Peter chapter 3. Ephesians chapter 5 says this: the wife must respect her husband. 1 Peter chapter 3 said, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. Without getting into much detail, that Greek word for both means to hold a reverence towards the other person, to give them honor. It's really difficult to be in the midst of an argument and screaming and yelling and saying things if you're honoring the other person. If you're going out of your way to out-honor. What a marriage look like? If you went out of the way, oh, you honored me. Oh, I'm going to try to up-honor you. I'm going to try to up-honor you. No, I'm going to out-honor you. And what if we lived in a way where the other spouse was always trying to out-honor you? What would that marriage look like? How would it grow? Here's homework. Homework that I want you to write down and I want you to do. Ephesians chapter 2, 1 through 18. I'm sorry, not Ephesians. Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 18. Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 18. Again, Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 18. We're not going to read it here because I'm not creating lazy Christians. Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 18. I want you and your wife to go home and read this passage because it's really, really, really hard to point fingers when you're washing each other's feet. Read this passage together. Love. I think too many times we don't love like Jesus. I mean, think about the type of love that Jesus has for us. I mean, he is a stubborn, unforgiving. He has a stubborn, forgiving, joyful, sanctifying love. We don't have that. We have an unforgiving love. We have an angry type of emotions. No matter how many times you and I screw up, Jesus still loves us. No matter how many times the accuser accuses us of our sinful behaviors, our God still loves us. Our God still extends grace to us. Our God still finds delight in us. Our God still pushes us to holiness, and our God still pursues us. Time and time and time again, our God has a stubborn, unforgiving, joyful, sanctifying love towards us. That is the type of love we should have in our marriages. What would your marriage look like if you loved like that? And lastly, to end this sermon and to end this series, you need to have a willingness to restore. You are in it for the long haul. You need to see your marriage not as a burden, but as a wonderful journey. This is a heart posture. This is a daily realization that this person that you married is someone that is in need of God's grace every day. Really, that's the whole basis of a twin bed marriage. To where the husband and wife are living so close to each other's heart, so close to Jesus' heart, that they live in such a posture that even the smallest of things that may wound you, you instantly long to forgive and restore. Because you don't look at this person as someone who hurts you, but you look at this person as someone who needs Jesus' grace every day. And so in the next few moments, let's end with a willingness to restore our marriages to the place God longs them to be, where he's the center of it. Not your hurt, not your pain, not your ups and your downs, not your wants and your dreams, but a marriage where Jesus is the center. If your spiritual gauge, emotional gauge, physical gauge, or sexual gauge is empty, today is the day to start anew. Today is the day to start fresh. May we not wall ourselves off to our spouse. May we not wall ourselves off to Christ. But God, may God break down walls and restore that one flesh union that He longs